Fanticulus. Fanticulus, that is in newborn. I think you know that connective tissue present here is between frontal and both parietal bones. That is soft connective tissue in newborn. Here it is fanticulus anterior and fanticulus posterior. Posterior fanticulus closed on the second month of the life, and anterior fanticulus closed at the beginning of second year or at the end of first year of the life. And sometime maybe fanticulus sphenoidalis here it is, and fanticulus mastoidus. They present only in premature newborns. For example, if somebody was born at the age of 7 months, in this case, these two fanticules closed in time of next 2 months. In mandible and maxilla has teeth, and teeth joined with alveolar dentalis the same with the help of connective tissue. Name of this connective tissue is periodontium, and type of articulation between teeth and alveolar dentalis, that is gymphosis, that is the same syndesmosis. And last type of syndesmosis, that is membranes, but on the skull we have not got membranes. Membrane we can find between radius and ulna on forearm. Here it is membrana interossa, that is interossal membrane, but on the skull we not found membranes, only ligaments. In the region of temporomandibular joint, 3 ligaments. Then we have sutura, we have fanticulus, we have gymphosis, but membranes are absent. Next type of articulation, that is articulation with the help of cartilage.
Synchondrosis.
Synchondrosis, you're right. And synchondrosis may be temporary and may be permanent. Permanent synchondrosis, that is if cartilage present in whole human life. And temporary synchondrosis, that is place where cartilage replaces into bony tissue. For example, between sphenoid bone and occipital bone, here it is, we have cartilage. That is temporary synchondrosis. Synchondrosis spheno-occipitalis. And this synchondrosis at the age of 20 years, it's replaced with a bony tissue, and this synchondrosis continues into synostosis with the help of bony tissue. Clear? And we receive one bone, os sphenoidale and os occipitale together fused into one bone, os basilaire. Os basilaire, that is fusion between occipital and sphenoid bone. Another temporary synchondrosis between sphenoid and ethmoid bone. Here it is the same synchondrosis spheno-ethmoidalis. It's also temporary synchondrosis, and these two bones fuse together with the help of bony tissue. And two permanent synchondroses on the skull. One of them is in the region of help me, what is this foramen?
Foramen
lacerum. On external surface, here it is, on external surface, foramen lacerum closed with the help of cartilage. Upper part, here it is, foramen is present, but on lower part, on external base of the skull, this foramen lacerum closed with the help of cartilage, and name of this cartilage, that is synchondrosis sphenopetrosa. Sphenopetrosa, between sphenoid bone and pars petrosa of temporal. And last permanent synchondrosis in the region of jugular foramen. Part of jugular foramen closed the same, only part of jugular foramen closed with the help of cartilage, that is synchondrosis pietro-occipitalis. Synchondrosis pietro-occipitalis. Two permanent and two temporary synchondroses on the skull. And synostosis, articulation with the help of bony tissue, we already said, between sphenoid and ethmoidal bone and between sphenoid and occipital bone. Here it is temporary synchondrosis, and then they replace with the bony tissue, we receive synostosis. That is synarthrosis, articulation with the help of connective tissue or cartilage or bony tissue. Another type of articulation, that is joints. And on the skull we have temporomandibular joint, articulatio temporomandibularis. This joint is between what and what? Here it is fossa mandibularis of temporal bone and head of the mandible, caput mandibuli, head of the mandible. Articulatio temporomandibularis. If joint consists of two bones, it has two articular surfaces, like here. That is simple joint. If joint has more than two surfaces, 3-4 surfaces, this joint is compound joint. For example, elbow joint. How many bones here it is? Humerus, radius, and ulna. 3 bones. That is why it is compound joint. Radiocarpal joint, here it is radius, and 3 bones of carpals. Scaphoidum, lunatum, and triquetrum. Pisiform bone not participate. 4 bones. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bones makes radiocarpal joint. That is compound joint. But temporomandibular joint, it is simple because it consists of 2 bones, 2 articular surfaces. Next, shape of this joint. This joint has condyloid shape because head of the mandible, it looks like condyle, or sometimes ellipsoid shape. That is not large differences between ellipsoid and condyloid. That is why temporomandibular joint is condyloid joint. Sometimes describes it like ellipsoid joint. Another joint, for example, shoulder joint, that is spheroid joint because head of the humerus has, it look like like spheroid, that is spheroid joint. Spheroid shape, yes. Some joints are plain joint, for example, joints between vertebrae. Next time we will discuss joints between vertebrae, that is plain joints. Maybe cylindrical joint, maybe trochlear joint, maybe saddle joint, the same, here it is. And joint between clavicle and sternum, that is saddle joint. A lot of shapes, different shapes. Next time you will answer only temporomandibular joint, and you should answer that it is condyloid joint. And this joint has in most cases, condyloid or ellipsoid joint has 2 axes of movement, but this joint, inside of this joint, it has intra-articular disc, discus articularis. And this disc, discus articularis, separates this joint into 2 halves, into 2 floors, superiorly and inferiorly, 2 floor or in joint. In this case, it is complex joint which has intra-articular disc or menisc, which is separate joint into 2 halves. That is complex joint. This joint is complex joint and it is multi-axial. It has 3 axes of movement. First axis, that is frontal axis. We can move mandible downward and upward. Yes, that is frontal axis. That is frontal axis, and we can move mandible downward and upward in frontal axis. Cletis. Next axis is vertical axis. In vertical axis, we can move mandible laterally. That is vertical axis, and we can move mandible laterally to the right and to the left. Lateral movement. And last axis is sagittal, or more better, it is axis which is correspond to the neck of the mandible. We can move mandible forward and backward. Is it possible? Yes, possible. Forward and backward. Yes. 3 axes of movement. And we move mandible downward, upward in frontal axis, laterally in vertical axis, and forward and backward in sagittal axis. That is multi-axial joint. And last, This joint is combined joint. Combined joint. Why? Because we have two joints, right and left temporomandibular joints, but both of them work together. Impossible to make movement in one joint without movement in opposite joint. It is combined because both joints work together. For example, shoulder joint. It is not combined because I move in my shoulder joint and opposite shoulder joint without movements, yes? Only in one joint it is not combined. But this joint is combined joints because if I make movement here, it is always we receive movement in opposite joint. Clear it is? One again, classification of temporomandibular joint. It is simple joint because it consists of two articular surfaces. It is shape of this joint is condyloid. In most cases, condyloid joints are biaxial joints, but this joint is complex joint because it has intra-articular disc, and this discus articularis subdivides cavities of this joint into two halves. And with the help of this disc, this joint receives possibility to move in three axes. That is why it is multi-axial joint. And necessary to describe movements, three types of movements in this joint. And it is combined joint because impossible to make movement in one joint without movement in opposite joint. Both of these joints work together. That is why they are combined joints. And last, ligaments. One ligament starts from zygomatic arc and goes to the neck of the mandible. That is lateral ligament, ligamentum laterale. It is strongest ligament in this joint, lateral ligament, ligamentum laterale. Another ligament starts from styloid process and goes to mandible. That is ligamentum stylomandibularem. And last ligament starts from sphenoid bone and goes to mandible. That is ligamentum sphenomandibularem. But main ligament, that is ligamentum laterale, lateral ligament. That is all. You will answer articulation between bones of the skull, but necessary to know classification. What is syndesmosis, synchondrosis, classification of joints, why this joint is simple, why it is complex, why it is combined, why it is multi-axial. Clear it is? But on Monday at 1:20, yes, at 1:20, you come here to mini exam in osteology. That is all. Bye.